afternoon, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. It's not working. No. Oh, now it's working. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our final session, Iraq's foreign policy and regional standing. If I haven't met you, I'm very sorry. My name is Sanam Vakil. I'm the director of Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program, and it's my great pleasure to welcome this distinguished panel for what will certainly be a very interesting and timely discussion about Iraq's regional role amidst all of the devastating tensions and the war that we are witnessing in Israel and Gaza, and the crisis that we are watching unfold for Palestine and Palestinians. Before we get started, I'm just going to remind you of a few of our housekeeping rules. We do have simultaneous translation. It will be available into English. I think as a panel, we are all going to be speaking English, but I can take any questions that come in or comments that come in Arabic. We are on the record. Our event continues to be live streamed, and you will be able to watch this session after the event as well. Please do tweet using hashtag Iraq Initiative, and anyone who is joining us online, I encourage you to submit questions throughout the panel using the Q&A function on Zoom. We would like this to be as interactive as possible, but certainly I'm going to give quite a bit of time to our distinguished panel to share their views, and I'm going to kick off and introduce them in order that they're going to speak. Farhad Al-Adin is the advisor of foreign affairs to the Prime Minister of Iraq. He was head of the Iraqi Advisory Council and formerly served as political advisor to the President of Iraq, Barham Saleh, and as political advisor to the former President of Iraq, Fuad Massoum, from 2014 to 2018. Prior to this period, he was the chief of staff for the Kurdish Regional Government Prime Minister from 2009 to 2011, then senior advisor to the KRG Prime Minister 2011 to 2012. He is a writer and observer on current political affairs of Iraq, Kurdistan, and holds a law degree from Al Bayan University and master's degree in leading innovation and change from York St. John University. Welcome, Farhad. Thank you for being here. Next, in order of speaking today, I have Adnan Tabatabai, who is the CEO of the Center for Applied Research in partnership with the Orient, CARPO, in Bonn, Germany. Adnan obtained his MSc in the Middle East politics at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Adnan is a well-known and respected Iran analyst. He has consulted frequently by European policymakers and businesses on Iran-related affairs. Through his work at CARPO, he has designed and facilitated Track 2 and civil society dialogue formats between Iran and Saudi Arabia since 2015. He has been involved in a variety of projects at CARPO on regional security in the Persian Gulf region, and he's the author of the book Morning in Iran, published in 2016, and he's regularly featured in international media, providing regular commentary and analysis on developments in Iran and across the region. So welcome. Ivan Parks, thank you for being here. Ivan is the Deputy Director for Iraq and Yemen at the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. Ivan has worked for 20 years in the UK Department of International Development, including postings covering Somalia, Afghanistan, and Sudan. So you bring a lot of experience on the region, but, you know, as a reminder, we're here to talk about Iraq, so we'll try to keep structure to what clearly looks like a packed hall with a lot to talk about. And last and certainly not least, pleased to welcome Victoria Taylor, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iraq and Iran in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. Victoria has been a career member of the Senior Foreign Service. She joined the State Department in 2003, and she has previously worked as the Director of North African Affairs from 2021 to 2023, Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Croatia from 2018 to 2021. She has also served as Deputy Director for Western Europe in the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs and as Director for Balkans, Caucasus, and Black Sea Affairs at the National Security Council, where she coordinated U.S. policy and advanced U.S. interests in the region. Other assignments to your long career has been positions in the Office of Iranian Affairs, on the Turkey desk in the Office of Southern European Affairs, and as an International Affairs Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Victoria has served overseas at the U.S. embassies in Georgia, Tunisia, and Pakistan, as well as at the U.S. consulate in Lahore. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree from the LSE in political science. Welcome, Victoria. And I will just remind you that, while Victoria also has a huge portfolio of work and has served in so many countries globally, she is here as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iran and Iraq, not for a spokesman for the U.S. Department of State. So let's also remind ourselves of that when we get to the Q&A. So thank you all for being here. I get lucky every year at the Iraq Initiative Conference because I have the great privilege of moderating the regional panel. In recent years, we've seen Iraq play such a pivotal role in regional foreign policy, bringing together neighboring states quietly, but also very publicly in multilateral forums like the Baghdad summit that we saw just 2 years ago that was then replicated at Amman. Regional integration has been such an important, I think, part of Iraq's foreign policy, the mediator role that Baghdad has taken on over the past few years, I think, has been really instrumental in laying the ground for a broader trend of regional de-escalation and dialogue between so many states across the MENA region that have had frayed ties and tensions. Obviously, it goes without saying that the horrific attacks on October 7th and the war that we are witnessing playing out, the loss of life that is just beyond description, is dramatically also putting pressure on regional states and, of course, Iraq as well. So in this session, I do want us to first focus on Iraq's foreign policy priorities, the direction of foreign policy travel, but also more broadly, think about how the war will be shifting regional dynamics and dialogue that have been built, but those ties are, of course, very fragile. Just as an update, the G7 today did call for a humanitarian pause in the war, and at the same time also called upon Iran to refrain from providing further support to Hamas or to be obstructive in regional security. So I just want to put that out there as well in the context of these activities. And we have seen Secretary Blinken travel to Iraq, meet with Prime Minister Soudani, and of course, very shortly after that, the Prime Minister conveniently or opportunistically perhaps carried the mantle of this regional role and traveled to Tehran as well. So we have a lot to discuss, and I'm going to start with you, Farhad. How important is de-escalation, regional integration for Iraq's security and foreign policy objectives?
Well, thank you, Sanam, and glad to be here, and thank you, and thanks to Renat for the invitation. I just need to dismantle some of the things you just said lately, the last thing. First of all, it wasn't the plan the visit of Secretary Blinken and the visit to Iran, they were not linked in any way. The visit to Iran was planned days ahead, while the visit by Secretary Blinken was not. And the fact is that Secretary Blinken arrived at 9:00 p.m. and the Prime Minister left to Tehran early hours of the morning, and all the meetings and the reception that he received in Tehran is a good, you can't arrange all of that in few hours. This is just to let you know. The fact is, the regional dynamics is very important to Iraq. Iraq definitely plays and have been playing a pivotal role in bringing stability to the region through diplomacy and through work. And really, especially with this government, the idea is what we call productive diplomacy and common interest. Creating common interest with your neighbors is a key component, that instead of Iraq becoming a conflict zone or an arena for settling scores, we want it to be an area of creating common interest with our neighbors and in the region. And for that purpose, there are a lot of projects that's been developed to create that atmosphere for Iraq. And you have been hearing quite a lot, as you are all Iraq followers. Development Road is a good example. The mega projects in investment in energy and all that. I mean, we see Crescent Petroleum here now. They just signed the contract for developing gas, which is again, it's a lot of countries involved in that in terms of developing the energy sector. So these are the ways that Iraq wants to build its security as well as regional security and stability. Unfortunately, the events of 7th of October and what came after it is heart-wrenching and destabilizing for not only the region, for the entire world. Iraq's stance on this is very clear. The Prime Minister expressed it in the Cairo summit very clearly. Iraq, there is an unwavering support for Iraq, for the Palestinian people. And definitely what we are seeing on the TVs these days, the death and destruction that's bestowed on the Palestinian people is something Iraq completely rejects. And at the same time, what you just announced about the G7 of a humanitarian pause will not cut it. Iraq's position is we need a ceasefire immediately. The killing zone that Gaza that became is not something that really humanity should accept. There are thousands and tens of thousands now of people killed. A good several thousands of those are children. And we clearly have seen throughout the history, violence breeds violence, extremism breeds extremism. So if what we have seen, and Iraq is definitely being experienced in experiencing the violence through the days of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all that, we know how it feels, and Iraqis know the devastation that will bring. And if you compare the terrorism before, then Al-Qaeda, then there was a big shift. But if you really compare ISIS's atrocities with Al-Qaeda, you would see the difference. And now we might go into a much higher level, and this is bad for everyone. And I can tell you that through ISIS, we found out this is not just contained in one region. This could very much spread worldwide, and you are not going to be safe. And that's why we need to really put a stop on this. This region deserves better. The people deserve better. But unfortunately, what we have seen so far has not been enough. The international community have not done its job. And there is an obligation for the international community to come to the rescue and to really help the people in Palestine to get rid of this conflict, or at least settle it for now, and then look for the solutions that we could find. So an immediate ceasefire is important. Opening the corridors and getting aid to the people that need it. You can't have 2.3 million people living in such conditions that it's just beyond imagination. I just came from another conference yesterday that I was there, and there was someone who was telling us as what it means to be Palestinian and living in Gaza now. And I can tell you, it's just beyond description how hard it is. And this cannot carry on while the whole world is watching and what we are seeing now. And that's why Iraq's position is very clear. We want to get aid to the Palestinian. Already three shipments has reached Arish in Egypt. Yesterday, the Council of Ministers decided on giving Gaza 10 million liters of fuel that should reach the hospitals, because at the moment we've seen on TV what conditions that they are operating under. And at the same time, really, we need to look beyond this current crisis and look for permanent solutions for the entire region. The region is right now is boiling. We have an armada of machinery, war machinery arriving in the Mediterranean, and doesn't look good. Do we really need something like this? I think the answer should be no, and we really need to get beyond that. Iraq, and it's through its diplomacy and the Prime Minister's initiative, is working hard on this. He has been in constant contact with world leaders, and the message has been reiterated again and again that we need ceasefire, we need to help the Palestinian people, and at the same time, we need to look for permanent solutions. And this message will not change, and it will continue.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you. Thank you for very clearly laying out Iraq's position, a very important one. I just want to ask you a follow-up, because over the past week, 10 days, we have seen the lull or the stability in Iraq also punctured. There have been attacks, rockets that have been launched from Iraq. US bases have been hit, and of course we have seen a US response. Are you worried, concerned? What was discussed with the secretary in terms of prioritizing Iraq's stability at this moment, where things are fragile and potentially compromising all of the progress that has been made?
Well, in terms of concern, absolutely. We are all concerned. One of the big concerns is the spread of this conflict to the region. And what's taking place in Iraq and the attacks that we have seen, the government has been very clear. On 23rd of October, through the military spokesman, the Prime Minister or the Commander-in-Chief issued a statement, a very clear statement. Anybody who's harming Iraq's interest would be followed and would be prosecuted. And this is definitely right now is in action. We have, and the Prime Minister, like 3 days ago, in a speech that he said that state is responsible for protecting, the government is responsible for the policy and protecting the state, and nobody outside the government should be allowed to dictate policy. This remains the case, and there are definitely those who want to harm Iraq, and Iraq's interest will be pursued. And this has been relayed to the Americans and to everybody else that the government is very serious in protecting the diplomatic missions, in protecting the military advisors that are on Iraqi bases, and these attacks on Iraq and on Erbil or anywhere else is attack against Iraq itself and the state, and the government will not hesitate to pursue it.
Thank you. Thank you for laying that out. We'll come back because certainly there'll be more questions in regards to further responses. I want to turn to Adnan now and bring you into the conversation. Obviously, Iran, to call Iran a key player in Iraq would be an understatement at this point. And I've sort of already laid out very much that Iraq's stability has been very much called into question in the past 10 days. But Iran plays a large role in Iraqi politics. And you have been working on this issue, studying this issue, researching this issue for a while. So it would be great if you could maybe lay out how you see Iran's activities and operations in Iraq, and how important is Iraq's stability for Iran?
Thank you, Sanam, and thank you, Chatham House, for having me here. Yeah, I think Iran's role in Iraq can be a conference for itself, and not necessarily only pleasant things to discuss. And I really want to highlight that the things that I'm going to discuss are, as you put it, observations from research, from meetings we held, but not in any shape or form an official position. But look, I think we need to somehow reduce complexity and try to make sense of how Iran sees Iraq. And I think what is well established is that Iraq is absolutely essential for Iran's sense of national security. So there is not a single more important context for Iran. And that has, again, a lot of different reasons that go back to history, but in the interest of time, we will not dive into that. And obviously, this means that Iran's view on Iraq is very securitized. And when it is securitized, it often becomes unpleasant. It often may run counter to anything we would define as soft power. Iran becomes a country in Iraq which is solely focused on its security interests rather than in, let's say, making friends maybe outside the power structure. So that is something that I think everybody in this room is aware of, some more, some less. The second thing that I believe is maybe less viewed at is that Iraq has become increasingly important for Iran for some of its diplomatic outreach to Arabic countries with which diplomatic relations did not exist until just March this year. But not only Saudi Arabia, also Egypt, Jordan, and even the UAE. Iraq had emerged in the past 2 or 3 years as a country to hold back channels. And I think that is a very positive development in the sense that what Kak Farhad was just referring to earlier, rather than being just a theater for proxy wars, becoming a hub for dialogue or a host for dialogue channels. And I think this is a role that Iraq has been playing, and this role has been ascribed to Iraq by Iran, but also by other countries in the region. And therefore, I think we can somehow sum this up as saying, in this particular dangerous moment of our region, that Iraq can be both. It can be a launch pad for Iran's deterrence policies in trying to scare away what Iran perceives as enemies and threats, but it can also be a launch pad for diplomatic missions. And I think this is an opportunity. And this is, to me, the reason why we should always think that actor X being part of the problem also means that actor X can be part of the solution. This is a very, very pragmatic way of thinking, looking at things, and it's not really popular and it's not really pleasant to think those that are creating problems can also be those who help solving this problem, who can help solving these problems. But I think in this particular time, Iraq has been has become a very important context for Iran to hold talks that can open an off-ramp from an escalatory cycle. Now, we heard that the trip of Prime Minister Soudani to Iran was pre-planned, and I definitely believe that, particularly because Kak Farhad was saying this. At the same time, of course, having a few hours earlier, Secretary of State Blinken there, he will have carried something to Tehran. And I think this even if it's just, I met him, if it's just that. In any shape or form, I mean, we don't want to like, or even if it's flowers, that would be wonderful. But look, I don't want to make I don't want to take this into a ridiculous moment. I'm just saying that these talks happen, and we don't have to know everything about these talks happening. But I think this in this point in time, that's really essential. And the final point that I would want to make is that anticipating that we will speak about the regional situation after the horror that is unfolding between Israel and Gaza, is that I think Iran is seeking to capitalize on this more politically rather than militarily, in the sense that you can capitalize on a moment when you have contacts to all sorts of very difficult to deal with actors that can make you a more valuable partner to talk to. And the decision is up to the others to say whether they want to talk to this partner that can talk to those unpleasant dudes and dudettes elsewhere. I'd leave it at that.
Thank you, Adnan. I'll certainly come back to you. I don't think we need to be popular. I think that we need to definitely be thinking about out-of-the-box new solutions. And you definitely present Iran as a pragmatic actor, and of course, their countervailing opinions that Iran is an ideological actor. So we need to come back and maybe explore that in my next round of questions, because there was reports of meetings in Tehran this summer and what the role of ideology in forward defense is about. So keep that percolating in your mind while I turn to Ivan. Thank you for joining us. The UK has been a key partner with Iraq, working bilaterally, supporting the state building process. And the UK, of course, is heavily invested in the broader region. Brexit has maybe perhaps raised some concerns as to, or maybe hope that there would be more investment or more from the UK. But how important is Iraq in the UK's foreign policy considerations? You've been working in the region widely, so if you could share your views, that would be great.
Thank you. So to start by thinking about what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and 7th of October, a lot of things changed for the region and for all of us. And we thought a little bit about what has actually changed in Iraq since then. And one thing that's changed, which has been mentioned, is the attacks by Iranian-aligned militia groups against coalition forces. That's one thing that has changed. Another thing that has changed, partly as a consequence of that, is certainly for the UK, we've drawn down some of our staff from our embassy in Baghdad, and others have done that. So, for example, we've drawn down the people working on climate change, the important issues we were talking about earlier. We've drawn down the people working on trade between Iraq and the UK. And that has, that is a big change for us. Another thing that maybe isn't a change but has become clear is the deep support for the Palestinian cause across Iraqi society, and as mentioned there from Farhad. But a bunch of things, a whole load of things have not changed. So what hasn't changed is that we've had a period of political stability. We've had a budget passed. What hasn't changed is we've seen Daesh degraded significantly in Iraq, and the whole country is much safer as a consequence of that. So there's some really good things that haven't changed, but there's some big challenges that haven't changed as well, and we've talked about a lot of those today. So we've talked about climate change just now. We've talked about the economy, and we've talked about demography. And I always, I've been working on the Iraq file for about 1.5 years now. And there are around 1.5 million more Iraqis alive now than were alive when I started in this job 1.5 years ago. And that is obviously a wonderful thing. We would all agree the world needs more Iraqis. But the problem for Iraq is that there's a certain amount of money available from oil, which now has to be spread around to another 1.5 million people. And that trajectory is continuing. We expect the oil price to maybe start to come down, and there's a huge car crash there. So the big risk, the strategic risk for me, is that in Iraq, we lose sight of these, we lose focus on these issues, as I described earlier, because these are the fundamental long-term challenges that Iraq has got to tackle. And a lot more could change as a consequence of this crisis, and it can go a bunch of ways. We could have a slow de-escalation, and we could get back to dealing with those long-term issues. Or we could have, a big new front in the conflict, and it could escalate, whether that's intentional or whether it's accidental, and it kind of escalates out of control. Sudani has done an excellent job of keeping a foot in each camp and kind of trying to be a bridge. If things escalate, he may be forced to choose one way or another, and I think that could be potentially disabling for the Iraqi government as well. Talking about how we see Iraq's neighbours, I fear talking about Iran next to Adnan here. There's a long history, it's a long border, there's a huge amount of interaction. Of course, we expect that. What we don't expect, and we condemn, is when Iran takes action to destabilize, whether that's the recurrence of the attacks by the militia groups we've seen recently, whether that's attacking Kurdish groups across the border. Iran, has its own part to play in de-escalation. And I ask myself, there are various things you could achieve by escalating the conflict in Iraq. One of those things that it doesn't achieve is it doesn't help the Palestinian people. I can't see how that actually helps the Palestinian people. It may help some other causes. And we've talked already about the important role that Iraq has to play in this. And, of course, it's a happy coincidence that Secretary Blinken visited just before, but there's a channel there and a bunch of conversations that the Iraqi government can have with Iran, which is incredibly useful. And conversations with us at the same time, of course. Looking across the region, the Gulf states, we've had loads of conversations earlier. I've heard it said 4 or 5 times, particularly on the issue of climate change, how important Iraq's relationship and regional solutions to these sorts of challenges that we're facing, whether it's diversification of the economy, whether it's around energy or water, the relationship with Gulf countries is going to be critical for Iraq, and we want to see that grow and get stronger and stronger. We've seen a fly in the ointment, perhaps, with a disagreement over the Iraq-Kuwait border recently, which I think those sorts of issues have the potential to do a huge amount of damage to those relationships. So we'd like to see those continue and get stronger. We've heard a lot also about Turkey, and Turkey, to us looks like, from our perspective, it's the bridge between Europe and Iraq, right? And we want to see a whole load of things flowing across that bridge. We want to see the oil restarted. We want to see more trade. We want to see water flowing in the other direction. But there's some things that we don't want to see flowing across that. And we come to questions like illegal migration and issues like drug smuggling. So cooperation and partnership between Iraq and Turkey is obviously hugely important for Iraq. And then finally, we should talk about ourselves. And we've had several ministerial visits to Iraq this year. Lord Ahmed, the Minister for the Middle East, travelled. One of our Home Office ministers travelled. The Duchess of Edinburgh travelled to Iraq a couple of months ago, and that was a big moment for us. And I hope we'll see many more UK ministerial visits to Iraq over the coming year. We hadn't seen any over the previous couple of years, partly to do with COVID, partly to do with the political instability that we had in Iraq. So I think that's a really positive sign for us. We also had a visit from Fuad Hussein here in July. And I think that sort of should be taken as an indication of the commitment and interest that the UK has to Iraq. And I think actually when I look around this room, I see that whatever the UK government's commitment and interest is, there's a huge interest in the UK and Iraq, just represented by the people in this room. I see my friends from the Iraqi embassy in the front row, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think you told me that there were 7,000 Iraqi doctors working in the British NHS, 4,000. Either way, it's many, many thousands. And I think that just tells you the links between the UK and Iraq, which are incredibly strong and personal. And one of the many reasons why the UK government will remain committed to Iraq to help it tackle some of the challenges that we've discussed over the last couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. You brought up some really key issues that, of course, are connected to the previous panel. For example, climate change is, very deep to regional security, actually, and it does serve as a nexus and a challenge for all of the countries that you mentioned in your remarks. And I think that's a very important point, alongside the possibility of Iraq playing further roles in de-escalation. I would like in our panel to be as interactive as possible, and please, sorry for not picking up on this earlier, but to stress, please pick up on each other's comments and respond to them. If Farhad, for example, when we come back to you, this is a great opportunity to respond.
Just have a small talk.
Okay, see, I noticed you nodding, that's why.
No, I agree with Ivan. Is the political instability in the UK has been so much in the last 3 years that we had really had problems with that.
These are the sign of the times that it's no longer just the Middle East that is known to be the area of instability. We've seen plenty of instability across the world, and of course here in the UK. And next year, is the year of democracy. 2/3 of populations in many states are going to be voting. The highest number of voters going to the polls. So it will be a really interesting year to see if that's going to lead to stable or unstable outcomes, and we'll sort of stop my sort of speculation on what that will mean for the Middle East. But Victoria, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. You've been working on an interesting portfolio of relationships, Iraq and Iran, but this is an Iraq conference. So let's start with the existing U.S.-Iraqi relationship within the current strategic agreement. And you're working on the Joint Security Cooperation Dialogue. Tell us a bit more about the priorities, the investments being made from your work and more broadly across the State Department. How do you view the U.S.-Iraqi relationship right now?
Sure, and thanks to Chatham House for having me here. So what I would say is, the U.S.-Iraq strategic partnership is longstanding, and we like to talk about it in terms of being a 360-degree partnership. And what we mean by that is we're not only focused on security issues, but we're working on really building on that partnership and finding new ways to expand it. And so I think over the course of this past year, that's really been a priority for us. We've been focusing on energy issues, looking at ways we can partner together on issues like climate, on water, and looking at how we can expand people-to-people ties, education, and making sure that it is not just a partnership rooted in military and security. And I think our ability to really develop this has been a result of a really significant period of improved security in Iraq, a period where there were no attacks by Iranian-aligned groups on U.S. forces or on U.S. facilities. And so a period of stability really allows us to focus on expanding that partnership. And I think it creates the kind of environment that allows both the Iraqi government and the U.S. to encourage increased foreign investment, encourage Iraqi businesses to invest. And so even as we work to expand that partnership in ways that go beyond security, I think it's important to remember, the basis for our ability to do so is in fact rooted in stability and security. We have, over the course of the past year, had a number of high-level engagements, to include a higher coordinating committee, which was focused on economic and energy issues, but of course, this joint security and cooperation dialogue. And really one of the outcomes of that dialogue was the creation of a process to establish a higher military commission that will continue the dialogue with the Iraqi government about the future of the coalition presence. And so that's a really important political conversation that we hope to continue. What I guess I think is an important corollary maybe to all of this is, of course, this post-October 7th environment. I actually was just in Iraq. As I've told some people, I left Washington, D.C. on October 6th. And then wound up traveling to Iraq on October 8th. And so I think the trip I thought I was going to have was very much focused on economic issues, energy issues, and the expansion of the partnership. And I think where we wound up instead was really talking about the importance of preventing an escalation of the Israel-Gaza conflict into Iraq, and preventing a destabilizing situation that would really hinder the ability of the United States and Iraq to expand that partnership. But I think it really is detrimental as well to the Iraqi government agenda. I think, speaking to Secretary Blinken's visit, this was very last minute. But I think it's really a reflection of the current geopolitical context and our concerns about the attacks of the Iranian-aligned groups that have been occurring quite regularly against U.S. facilities. And I think these are important conversations that we've had at very senior levels with the Iraqi government and with other Iraqi political leaders. And I think, I have to say, we, of course, very much appreciated the Prime Minister's own comments that these attacks are unacceptable. We agree. Of course, the U.S. And coalition presence is there at the invitation of the Iraqi government, and we're there because we care about Iraq's stability and security. We're there to continue to the mission to defeat ISIS. And that's a goal that is shared by the coalition and the Iraqi government. I think the other thing I would say is, I think we've been pretty clear as well in public with the Iranian government about, the risks that their activities bring to regional stability. And, the message again is, you, Iran, are responsible for the activities of your proxies and your militia groups. And, it's important for Iran to understand that we hold it accountable for those actions and for those attacks that have been ongoing.
Thank you, Victoria, and for laying out the work that you've been doing, and also making clear some of the red lines and priorities from Washington. That's very helpful. I do want to follow up and ask you about Iran, because it is part of the portfolio, and of course, deeply connected to Iraq in many ways. The Biden administration has an informal understanding with the Islamic Republic of Iran with regards to the escalation or acceleration of its nuclear program. And that has informally allowed Iran to export higher numbers of barrels of oil per day, and it has perhaps dialed down the temperature in that portfolio. We know that there's a huge Iranian portfolio of challenges that the US and UK and other governments face. Are you worried that in the context of the current war, that there will be spillage or spillover? We've already seen compromise to Iraq's security, and of course everyone's very worried about regional escalation, despite messaging from Hassan Nasrallah and even Khamenei and the like. But are you worried that there'll be spillover into some of the other portfolios, and that we could be sort of walking into not just a regional war, but also an acceleration of Iran's nuclear program and beyond?
Well, I guess I would say maybe first I want to correct one point, and that is that we've continued to enforce all of our sanctions, which I think everyone knows. We have a very rigorous and broad sanctions portfolio that we have with Iran. I think there's been a misconception that, as part of the discussions that led to the deal to bring back the detainees, that in some way there was a loosening of U.S. sanctions, or that there was, not an enforcement. That's actually not the case. I think what you're seeing is, just the difficulty of enforcing oil sanctions in many ways when not all countries really are concerned about the possible impact of U.S. sanctions. I think it's certainly our goal to make sure that there's no spillover into the nuclear file. We do remain very focused on this, and I think the president has been very clear that the U.S., it's our position that Iran will not obtain a nuclear weapon, and so we're very active in discussions with our partners as well about the best way to constrain Iran's nuclear activity. We remain concerned that Iran has not been adhering to its obligations with the IAEA, and so that remains an area of focus as well, even at this moment when we're very concerned about the possibility for escalation in the region.
I think this is a great opportunity to open the floor for discussion. I very much welcome comments in the Q&A on Zoom, and also from the floor. Just a few rules. First of all, please wait for the microphone before you start speaking. Second of all, please introduce yourself, name and affiliation. That's very important. Ideally, if you can keep comments to a minimum and focus on a question, that would be really helpful. I can be quite a stern chair, so I might cut you off if you go on for too long. Starting with the lady here in the front. Thank you.
Diana Galeeva, Oxford University. Thank you so much for a panel, very interesting. My question to Mr. Al-Din, I would like to you mentioned about the regional standing of Iraq, but what about international standing? What we heard from the panel that West remains one of the strategic partners, but at the same time, Iraq also interested in joining BRICS, and also there are discussions that they will be that Iraq will accept all conditions, including, for example, working on de-dollarization and withdrawal of cash in US dollars. Politically speaking, it also means that it will support the members of like Russia, China, and India, which are interested in multipolar world order. So my question: where is Iraq standing in this world order? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. I'm going to take two more questions and then turn back to the panel. Yes, sir, right here.
Jamil Gursel, member of Chatham House, and also I'm an international lawyer. The Middle East has been always troubled land, and it is also the birth and the death of civilizations. At the moment, what we are seeing in troubled Palestine is literally war crimes / genocide. Now, in relation to Iraq, the visit by Secretary of State, you are obviously have information which we don't have. Did the Secretary of State ask your government, once this war stops or the massacre stops in Palestine and the people are expelled from Gaza, did he ask your government to take some refugees there? If
Can you get to the finished question? Yes? Are we done?
okay, for you, yes.
Thank you. The lady here. Thank you.
Thank you. Noor Kadim, I'm also an international disputes lawyer. I've heard a lot of terms such as escalation of potential events in the region and stability. The inference appears to be that it would be Iran or the Arab players that would be instigating this. Given the title of this panel, which my question will get to, let's take the proposition that the position of the US right now, having sent 2 aircraft carriers, 2 extra aircraft carriers representing a huge proportion of its military capability, isn't seriously supposed to be a deterrent, given that Hamas has nothing but rockets and Hezbollah doesn't even have air capability. Taking the proposition that potentially there might be a conflict that the US may wish to instigate vis-a-vis Iran, let's say, what would Iraq's position be within that difficult situation, given the relationship that it wishes to maintain with the US, but also its relationship with Iran? What would its if Iran was to be pulled into such a conflict, whoever starts it?
Thank you. That's a supposition, but we'll get to it. Are there any other questions for anyone else on the panel? Right now, it looks like most of the questions are for you, Farhad, so I want to give some of our other speakers an opportunity. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Hamid Al-Kifai. I just wanted to ask Dr. Alauddin what...
Thank you. And for all of the other expertise on the... Okay.
It's in connection with what Adnan Tabatabai said,
so...
that Iraq is a launching pad for Iran's actions, whether diplomatically or militarily or whatever. Are you happy about this position, that Iraq is basically working for Iran?
Okay, that was a backdoor. All right, we'll stop now. I mean, Farhad, you have a few questions that you can pick up on, but I do want to broaden it and give Victoria and Ivan and Adnan an opportunity, to pick up on the issue of geopolitics, Russia and China in the region, refugees, if you will. Is the U.S. Getting ready to instigate a conflict in the Middle East? I'm not on the panel, but my answer would be no, as it were. Biden is just about to go into an election year. But last but not least, Farhad, are you happy?
Look,
we'll let you get started.
Yeah, the question about BRICS and so on, Iraq has been invited, like many other countries, and looking into the options that Iraq has. We certainly have very good relationship with all the BRICS countries. The Prime Minister was on a visit to Moscow not long ago, and this is not. It's not a matter of choosing alternatives or either with this or the other. That's not how Iraq operates. It's a matter of having options open to you that best serve Iraq. And we don't believe that if you are part of this, you have to be against the other. We have strategic partnership with the United States, and we continue to do that, and we are working on developing it further. But at the same time, we have interest with China, for example, where 25% or more of our oil is bought by China. We do a lot of trade with China, so there's nothing wrong with exploring whatever options and so on. So in many ways, it is something that we do. The gentleman, definitely this kind of questions will not be tolerated and will not be even considered if it is asked, but Secretary Blinken never asked this kind of question, and he certainly have not looked into this. This is pure imagination that we are looking at expelling the Gazans from Gaza. It's impossible. There's no way to have 2.3 million people displaced, and all the Arab countries have rejected the notion of accepting refugees from Gaza. Even Egypt and Jordan, which are linked and they're neighbors, they have rejected the notion totally. So this is not on the cards and is not something that's been looked. Iraq's position on future conflict, this is really not something we would look at as a hypothetical. Iraq enjoys excellent relationship with Iran, but this, again, U.S. is a strategic partner for Iraq. What we hope is we go through to stability of the region rather than yet another war. And this is what Iraq will be working with, is working on both sides to reach consensus and reach settlement. And we have been actually doing that quite a bit these last, especially with this government in this last year. There has been moments, I'm not going to get into details, where escalation was on the cards and could have gone really badly, but the Prime Minister personally intervened and have managed to calm down the situation, and this is known for both sides. So that's Iraq's position always, where will contribute to de-escalation, will contribute to stability. As far as Iraq is a backyard or a front yard or whatever you want to call it, look, Iraq on its own is Iraq on its own, and Iraqis are proud to be Iraqis. And this is the Prime Minister certainly works for Iraq first. This has been from day one the motto that has been driving the policies, Iraq first. Even in this conflict and even everything else, that we need to look at what is the best interest of Iraq, and then we take it from there. We are not going to fight anybody's war, and we are not going to help anybody against the other. As I said just earlier, we will help as much as we can when it is possible that Iraq becomes the fa'al khair. But anything else, no. It's always the priority for Iraq and Iraqi interest.
Thank you, Farhad. Victoria, let me turn to you.
Thanks. Well, I'm not going to answer. I think this was a little bit of a complicated hypothetical, but I want to make clear the U.S. has no interest in an escalation of any sort in the region. And yes, there are additional U.S. assets in the region. This is part of our effort to deter an escalation, not to try to prompt one. We've been very clear in our public messaging and in all our communications with our partners and allies. And, you know, the very active diplomacy you've seen by President Biden, by Secretary Clinton, by our Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs is really in support of that effort right now. And again, you know, the message to Iran, which we've been very clear about publicly, is that we do not seek an escalation. That Iran is responsible for the activities of any of the groups that it supports, and that we expect Iran to tell them to stop attacking us.
Thank you for making that clear. Ivan, over to you.
I just wanted to pick up on the geopolitics point, because I was looking at the map behind here, and you notice that Iraq is like, it's right in the middle. It's very right in the center. And, you know, what Farhad was saying is, you know, it's entirely rational for Iraq to want to have good relationships with all of its neighbors and all of the powers. If I think through my lifetime, the times when Iraq has not had good relations, there was a long war with Iran. That wasn't great for anybody. There was a period of bad relationships with the US and the UK. That didn't end well for all of us. So I think it's entirely rational position. While we might long for Iraq to be, you know, 100% aligned with us and, you know, vote with us in the UN General Assembly and whatever it happens to be, the Iraqi position is, as you described, is an entirely rational and sensible one.
Thank you. Thank you for also pointing that out. And you know, geography doesn't count for nothing. You can't just ignore your neighbors. And that in itself, I think, is a useful prism to think about the region. As de-escalation has very much driven so much dialogue over the past few years, and hopefully will continue. Adnan, over to you. You can pick up on the points. I want to throw out my additional question, because, well, yes, ideology bit and the role and relevance of ideology for Iran's role in the region, supporting all of these different groups. There were reports of a meeting that was held in Tehran last summer, where the Axis of Resistance was invited to Tehran and met with the Supreme Leader. You know, what does that tell us about the importance of Iran in the Israel-Gaza war, but in the importance of Iran, what is Iran seeking? What is Iran trying to achieve in supporting all of these myriad groups across the region? I know this is a big one for you and probably another conference, but honestly speaking, it is interfering and destabilizing beyond its borders. So how do you see Iran's worldview through this policy that it has promoted and adapted?
Yeah. No, I think, and this goes slightly back to the question about the US role currently and what Victoria laid out and what you asked earlier about ideology. I think we can link that really with the recent speeches also of the Supreme Leader. Ideology in Iran's foreign policy, on the one hand, of course, is this whole Shia political Islam, but I would argue even more so it is anti-imperialism. And this is also why I would think that when we think about these groups that are aligned with Iran, it's much more accurate to refer to this to the axis of resistance rather than to the Shia crescent. Because if you call it the Shia crescent, you assume the key driver is religion or the Shiism for that matter. But when we speak about axis of resistance, it's much more linked to resisting the global order. I mean, that is more or less what the Islamic Republic since 1979 is preaching. It's basically challenging the global order. And here, anti-imperialism always has the US as the key adversary. And now coming to the Supreme Leader's speeches, on the one hand, it's good news for those who are very concerned about regional escalation, but it's bad news for a country like Iraq, unfortunately, or Syria, when the Iran Supreme Leader early on into this horrific conflict has really elevated the importance of the US in all of this. So in his first public speech after the horrific attack of October 7th and then the attacks on Gaza, he immediately started talking about the US. And this is what other even commanders of the Revolutionary Guard or of Iran's military apparatus in general are talking a lot about the US, which means that to me, this is a way, and I'm just speaking about, it's a bit sinister and cynical to think this way, but I'm just saying that this may be a possibility to save face and not go all out against Israel, but to basically divert the whole discussion on the US-dominated imperialism, and that these groups that Iran has cultivated, supported, I wouldn't say that Iran is fully controlling them. I'm also not going to say that Iran leads fully the chain of command, but there are strong alignments, strong convergence of interests. And when it comes to ideology, it may be this anti-American position. Now, when Victoria spoke about deterrence, and I think deterrence seems to be the new ta'aruf in the region for one way or another. It's really you are out deterring, the players are out deterring each other in the way that Iran is trying to deter American presence in the region, trying to suggest that the costs for you of this Israel-Gaza war is going to be immense. So now contain the Israelis and their invasion of Gaza. And on the other hand, the US presence is also basically saying the same to Iran, that we are ready. We have the mentioned US presence in the region. Sorry? Yes, no, I mean, it's obviously, it's massive. And Iran is aware, Iran is very well aware that this military capability that the US is presenting just around its corner is never going to be in any shape or form able for Iran to be seriously challenged. So this is what I mean, that the good news that I was referring to was, I also think that ultimately for Iran, there is no interest in letting this turn into a regional war. But in order to politically capitalize on this, it is playing this anti-imperialism, anti-US card. This is at least how I'm reading it. And this gives us the opportunity to use the channels that I mentioned earlier to somehow, to deter each other, to send messages of de-escalation across.
Thank you, Adnan. I think there's a lot more questions. I'm going to take one from Zoom. Hadani Ditmars has a question for you, Victoria. Hadani is a journalist, a writer, a PhD candidate at KCL, and is interested in having you comment on how, if at all, the current turmoil at the State Department over the president's position on the war has impacted your portfolio on Iran and Iraq. So park that. I'm going to take some more questions and come back to you. Yes, sir. Question here in the front. Could you please introduce yourself and give your name? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Shad. I'm a student at Royal Holloway University of London. So my question is, Iraq has a lot of infrastructure built by other countries. So speaking from experience in Kurdistan, some schools, hospitals, and airports are built by countries such as the US, Turkey, and the UK, and etc. As Iraq enters a new dawn, when will we see more Iraqi-built infrastructure, whether it be in Baghdad or Erbil? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady here. Oh.
Thank you very much. Ina Rudolph from King's College London, and my question is to Victoria Taylor, but also to anyone who wants to comment. So how much conviction and reliance is there from the US side in the notion that Iran has the will and the capabilities to exert full control over all of its alleged proxies? And also, how can you prepare for the risk of more wild cards, more ambitious groups who want to make a name for themselves to escalate independently?
Thank you. And the lady over here.
Hi, I'm Leila Mudirzadeh. I'm a research executive at ORB International, and my question is towards you, Adnan. I'm half Iranian, so I'm aware of the scope there. How aware do you think Iranians are of the hand that we play in Iraqi politics? And given our own concerns over internal stability and economic stability, do you think they're in support of that if they were to have more awareness of it?
Thank you. Okay, back to the panel. Victoria, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I would say, I think for anyone who works in government, there will be times when you're working on policies and you will have your own personal views. And sometimes those personal views will differ from the official U.S. policy. And I think, what you are seeing in the press, and I think reflected is that, there are many people, in the broader, obviously broadly within the U.S., who have a variety of views about U.S. policy in the Middle East. And those, the many ways the State Department is a microcosm of the United States. We have people from all different backgrounds and with a variety of opinions. And so I think this is playing out just as the discussion is playing out within the United States publicly. Those discussions are happening within the State Department. And so, I'm not particularly surprised to see that some of these debates are happening right now. And I think it's just a reflection of what a difficult and challenging issue this is and how tough it is for some of our staff. I'd also say, within the State Department, I think one of the reasons we are seeing this debate take place is that we have tried to recruit people from all different backgrounds to make sure that the State Department is more reflective of the U.S. as a whole. And so I think that's just a healthy thing for us to have, to make sure that there are active policy debates within the government that can make sure that we have a better and stronger policy overall.
Thank you.
And then I think to the other question, I guess I would say, we did have a long period here where there were no attacks by many of these Iranian-aligned groups on the United States. And I think, to my mind, that sends a strong signal that there are times when both the groups and the Iranian government have decided that it would not serve their interests to have attacks on U.S. facilities. I think, the reason that we suggest that, we'll hold Iran responsible is because we know they provide training, weaponry, and often provide guidance to many of these groups. And so, the Iranian government will always deny that it has full control over them. But I think it's part of their broader strategy to be able to have this kind of plausible public deniability. But, ultimately, that's something that we reject.
Thank you. Ivan, would you like to comment on that or any of the other questions as well?
Yes, I mean, so I completely agree with that. I mean, I felt 2 weeks ago as if we were in a really dry forest and it hadn't rained for 6 months and people were striking matches and trying to put them to the ground to set the whole region alight. I don't feel that way now. Now I feel like we're in that forest and people are playing with boxes of matches and flicking them around, and maybe they catch and maybe they don't. And I think what Iran has done is brought the matches into the forest, and they may set alight. And we talk about wildcards. So as you'll see from my description, I also cover Yemen, and we know that the Houthis have made some attacks into Israel, to date unsuccessful, shot down either by US or by Saudi or by Israeli defenses. I kind of wonder what happens if those are successful, if something gets through. Does then Israel retaliate and airstrike Sinnar? What then does the Saudi-led coalition that controls the airspace around Yemen do? Does it sit back and watch that happen? So I think these are the sorts of wildcards that are absolutely like there and present, and it's Iran that's brought the matches to the dry forest, and any of them could set alight.
Thank you. I think that's quite apt description of the moment and the fragility of this. Not enough firefighters out there. So, Farhad, infrastructure.
Yeah, there are many companies, Iraqi developed companies that they have capabilities of getting into big projects now, be it in Kurdistan or the rest of Iraq, but still we need a lot more. And the Iraqi companies are working with the international partners and getting into partnership with big companies who are working in Iraq. So this is a gradual process, I would say, that we have. But if I comment on the possibilities of war and so on, I would just say, I personally don't believe we have seen the real picture of what's taking place right now. There is a lot more to it than 1,100 people crossing the Israel wall and coming back with a few hundred hostages, and then Israel bombing the hell out of Gaza and so on. And the huge armada being present in the Mediterranean, arriving so quickly and so on, even a nuclear submarine, even during the Gulf War, nuclear submarines were not coming to play. So maybe there is a lot more, and I don't believe this is Iran-led or just Iran thing. There is a lot more to it, and I would say we do need to take a step back and look at it and what could be the devastation coming out of this if really wisdom doesn't come to play. So it is extremely dangerous and precarious time, and let's not indulge ourselves into this is Iran and they have to control Iran, or Iran saying we have to get the US out and so on. This is very dangerous, and the whole region could be up in fire very quickly.
Thank you. Adnan, question for you specifically.
Yeah. Before I get to that, I really think that it's indeed important. On the one hand, of course, it's good news that Iran is not controlling all of these parties, but it's also, or these actors, but it's also bad news because you cannot easily say, Iran, please tell them to stop. But that brings me to the meeting you referred to, Sanam. In summer, there were these reports about basically the entire axis of resistance top brass meeting in Tehran. And when there was this decision to stop attacks on US presence in Iraq, we also had these reports about Iranian commanders traveling to Iraq and making sure that they all really abide by it. And there is, of course, also, you talked about the matches, and I think it's a good analogy to use. And the meeting, in the best case scenario, that meeting in summer could also mean that, okay, all these matches are supposed to stay confined and to basically as I mentioned earlier, cultivate them in the way that they keep their focus on things. But that's just speculation on my part. To your question, and I really hope I got it right. When you said Iranians, did you mean the leadership or the people? The people. Okay. So Iran-Iraq relations, as I said, it's an entire conference for itself because it's so multi-layered. You have, of course, the political relations between the two countries. You have the clerical relations, both in friendship, but also in rivalry, of course. You have military to military, you have paramilitary to paramilitary, family interlinkages. So it's really multi-layered. So I think that the proximity to Iraq is something deeply felt. Now, the political approach towards Iraq has been subject to criticism quite often. Partly because many Iranians are saying that the amount of money that is put into Iraq should be invested in Iran, but then you would, of course, have to tell them that a lot of the money that Iraqi militias are receiving is actually basically coming from the Iraqi state. But the consequences of all of this, of course, is that, for example, broadening economic relations or cultural relations between Iraq and Iran is not happening. One of our wonderful speakers in this conference this morning asked me, why is there no Iranian film festival in Iraq? And yes, absolutely fair question. Why is there no such a thing? Because in a securitized context that I mentioned earlier, you don't think of organizing film festivals, unfortunately. But it could be much more people-to-people oriented, much more about being neighbors. But unfortunately, the cynical side of it, when it's all focused on security, you just want to make sure that the power structure in your neighboring country doesn't change in a way that can become threatening to you. And then you ignore people, and that's a real pity.
Farhad, you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, the year-long stability that we enjoyed actually was negotiated by the Prime Minister Soudani in the first place. Prior to forming of the government, he did meet personally with the many groups, and it was a question put to them, what do you want? It's for us to form a government, these attacks cannot take place. And that was translated to what we called the ceasefire. And actually the ceasefire held until 7th of October. So it is very much an Iraqi decision to hold the ceasefire. However, it's a simplistic way to look at these groups and think that Iran has this on and off button and it's a switch in their hand. This is really, it means lack of understanding of these groups and how they operate. They are not universal. They are not the same operators. They don't have the same agenda. They might all look into the same aspect and take advantage of the resistance framework, if you want, or even the word, the terminology. But actually, they have completely different agendas. Some of them are simply warlords. They diminish during stability and peacetime, and they thrive during war times. And this is the best opportunity for them after 7th of October that they come back to play. I mean, if you read the tweets by Sayyid Ali Khamenei, he's clearly endorsing Iraqi government and the prime minister for that matter, and his efforts to control the violence. But yet, on the day that he came back, we saw the attacks on the basis. Does that mean that they don't listen to Sayyid Khamenei, or they are challenging the Iraqi government? Actually, they work alone, and they have their own agenda. And this is why we need to look a lot deeper into this, rather than think and let others to think that this is a button in the hand of Iran that they can switch it on and off at one moment.
Thank you, Farhad. There is a comment here for you, Adnan, from Hadani, who says that he was just in Baghdad for an international theater festival, and the winning play was the Iranian production of Macbeth.
Thank you for mentioning that.
I think there clearly needs to be a bit more investment on the people-to-people arts and cultural space, and all of the track twos that we do. There certainly isn't enough opportunity to focus on those people-to-people ties. I want to take one final round of questions and then give it back to the panel to make some closing remarks. Yes, over to you, sir.
شكرا جزيلا. سجاد سالم عضو مجلس النواب العراقي. يعني حقيقة أفهم الهاجس يعني عد السفارات اللي موجود هو حماية البعثات الدبلوماسية، وهذا مقبول نوعا ما، ولكن ما تعتقدون بأنه بهذه الطريقة يتم فرض معادلة جديدة على المجتمع العراقي وعلى المجتمع الدولي، بأنه الإطار التنسيقي وهو الأقلية الخاسرة في الانتخابات أما يكون في الحكم وبالتالي محمية السفارات والبعثات الدبلوماسية، أو يكون خارج الحكم وبالتالي يتم تهديد كل البعثات الدبلوماسية بالصواريخ وعبر قصفها. بالنهاية راح نضحي بقيمة حقيقية وهي الديمقراطية، ونضحي بتداول السلمي في العراق، وهذا خطر جدا على مستقبلنا. شكرا جزيلا.
Pardon? Yes. Did you have a question or was that just a comment? Did you get the whole question? Okay. Yes, please, because it took us so long to get our... But there was no question.
يعني أنا أفهم الهاجس اللي موجود عند السفارة الأمريكية أو البعثة الدبلوماسية البريطانية بخصوص حماية سفاراته والبعثات الدبلوماسية، وهذا مقبول جدا ومفهوم. ولكن أثناء هذه العملية يتم فرض معادلة جديدة على المجتمع العراقي وعلى المجتمع الدولي، بأنه أما الإطار التنسيقي واللي هو ممثل الميليشيات والفصائل واللي هي الجهة الحاكمة حاليا في العراق، أما يكونون في الحكم وبالتالي البعثات الدبلوماسية تبقى في أمان، أو يكونون خارج الحكم وبالتالي يتم تهديد البعثات الدبلوماسية. أعتقد إحنا بهذه الطريقة نضحي بالديمقراطية، نضحي بتداول السلمي للسلطة، وهذا خطير جدا على المجتمع العراقي. وشكرا جزيلا. والسؤال إلى السيد إيفان وفيكتوريا.
Okay. Any final questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. Anissa Bassiri, Control Risks. Good to see so many familiar faces and great remarks. Very quick question, Farhad, perhaps to you, about concerns within the government about the war implication on the price of oil. We know how much the budget has been a success, but we know how much it relies also on the price of oil. And I wonder whether there are concerns in this sphere. It has been already a month, and not many implications on that front, but things can change quite dramatically with implication for the stability of Iraq and so many projects, development projects and others that do. The implication of the war in Gaza, Israel for the price of oil and therefore the budget and stability plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question here, very quickly.
أنا جنات الغزي، وأنا امرأة عراقية عايشة بالواقع العراقي يوم بيوم أشوفه. سؤالي موجه إلى أستاذ فرهاد. أكثر من مرة تم ذكر أنه حكومة العراق أو العراق هاي الحكومة بالذات مستقرة سياسيا، وأنه ماكو شيء. مع العلم إحنا وضعنا كنساء بالعراق كلش تراجع خلال هاي الفترة. أكو سفارات انحرقت، الدولة ما قدرت تسوي شيء. أكو ناس انقتلت والدولة ما قدرت تسوي شيء عن أي استقرار، والميليشيات هي اللي تحكم، والميليشيات عندها شركات مسيطرة على أكثر القطاعات الموجودة بالعراق. الاستقرار اللي تحكي عنه احنا ما نشوفه، تقدر تشوفنا اياه ولو بشكل بسيط؟
Thank you very much. I want to just add one more question to the mix and take the panel back to also why we're here, to talk about Iraq's foreign policy and Iraq's role in the region. And this war is likely to go on for far too long, and we can't fully anticipate all of the twists and turns that are ahead of us. But we've all spoken, and I've heard you all say that Iraq has an important role to play in de-escalation and mediation. So how, if at all, do you anticipate Iraq playing a role in the coming months? I know there's the OIC summit. Iraq has very important ties with the Gulf states all across the region. It really is a bridge. Where do you see, or how do you see Iraq playing a role? Please add that to your final remarks. Adnan.
I would say that Iraq alone cannot pull it off to be the one country hosting different dialogue channels, but can be one of the very important ones. I would also mention Qatar in this. I would, when we look at our region, I would obviously also think of Oman, which has always been playing this role. And I think the role that Iraq has been playing should be given much more credit to. And I also think that listening to the language that country or political leaders like the Iraqis would like to be used in order to address this war in a way that would resonate better in the region would be really important. So to listen not only to advice coming from Iraq, but to also the type of the language that has to be used in order to not have the entire region continuing to be enraged by what's going on. So I think, that in itself is already a lot.
So I think there's something really special about Sudani in that there are not many things that both the UK and the US on one hand and Iran on the other hand want to be a success. And Sudani is one of those few things. So I think that gives him actually a really important role, and actually more power and influence than you might typically expect. So I think there is a real role for him. I think for me, the smaller part of it is actually going across to Iran. It's the extent to which he can influence those actors that Fahad were talking about and stop things getting out of control, which absolutely is in the interest of Iraq. There's no question about that. But I just want to say that we're talking about this stuff, and it's kind of like it's on the news and it's in our faces and it's really challenging. If I would talk about things that I sleep really well, but if what would keep me awake at night with regards to Iraq, where I kept awake, it would be the things we talked about earlier. It's the climate change, it's the economy, it's the confluence of the economy and the demographic trends, which are going to give Iraq in 10, 20 years' time huge problems. So my sort of plea and hope for the government, why stability is actually important, is that we need to, the government of Iraq has to tackle those issues, and that will mean that in 20 years' time there won't be a Chatham House conference on Iraq, because it'll be too boring, because everything will be in hand and peaceful and sorted out. If those issues are not dealt with, there's a long future for Chatham House looking at Iraq.
Thank you, Ivan. And we do have Chatham House conferences on many countries, so I hope that we will always have a conference on Iraq. But Victoria, over to you.
Yeah, I guess I'd just go back to where I started, and I think the U.S. and Iraq have shared priorities, and that's a stable, secure, prosperous Iraq that has strong relations with its partners. And so I think obviously this current time period, we're much more focused on security. And I hope we can return to this very long period where we had no attacks, where we had a strong and stable security situation, because that's what really enables us, the Iraqi government, and the countries in the region to really focus on the long-term future and success of Iraq and building prosperity and encouraging increased investment from outside. And I think those are goals that are shared not only by Americans, but by Iraq's own citizens as well.
Thank you, Victoria. Farhad, a few final difficult questions.
No, that's fine. Just quickly on the oil thing, it's the price of oil went up in the start of the conflict and now come back to the levels that more or less was before. The danger is if the escalation of the war happens, and especially in the Gulf, then we would be looking at big spikes in oil price, obviously that nobody wants, including Iraq. So the more stability we have, the better it is. And at the moment, we could say it's no longer affecting the oil market per se. As far as the stability that I'm talking about, it is real. It's not imaginary, and it's not that I am talking about it. The fact is, few months before the government formation, Baghdad was a war zone. And actually 57 people were killed in the green zone. And in a one-year battle to form a government, Baghdad was very difficult to live in. And before that, there were a great deal more tension and problems, and journalists getting killed, people kidnapped, and so on. Now we have 1 year. If you come to Baghdad, and inshallah you go, you see that restaurants are full. People are, oh good, that's even better. You see the restaurants are full. Just I'll let you know. Just let me explain. You had your say. You could easily see that the level of violence that was once existed is not there. This year has been the most stable year in the last 20 years. There are by far no explosions, no killing in the streets, no kidnapping. Only during the normal crime scene in a city of 13 million. Don't tell me London there are no crimes, or Los Angeles or New York. This is like, Baghdad is like a metropolitan city like anywhere else. Very much ordinary crimes does take place. Oh, absolutely. No question about it. However, let's not kid ourselves. We are emerging from 50 years of war, from really bloody violence, wars that we have seen through the invasion, later on the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so on. So it's Iraq has been a theater of violence and lots of it, and wars. And 1 year is not going to bring you to the level that we hope for. Okay, we are on a step in the right direction, but definitely we do have that aspect that you haven't seen. I'm sorry about that, but certainly there is a lot more stability now than ever been, and hopefully it will be more. The issue of the government and the progress that is making is massive. The program that it was ambitious. Last year I remember being here, and as Renat said, you had a shopping list. I had a shopping list of what this government is looking for. That was a government formed like a couple of weeks before the event here. And everybody said it's a wishful shopping list. Actually, that wishful shopping list became a 29-page government program. And now there are, if you have a look at it and the items and the progress made, you see this is absolutely big. I started with mentioning Crescent Petroleum. I come back to mention them. They signed a contract now that was signed in 2018 and never saw the light. And actually, with this government, they signed the contract and now they're working. The contract with Total, that was negotiated and agreed upon in 2010. 13 years later, now this government signed it, and it's a $27 billion contract that it is commencing and working. These are the actual progress. They don't need, it's not propaganda. These are actual facts on the ground that speaks volume. It's going to take time. There is no question. Iraq was devastated and damaged throughout these years. And maybe I would like to conclude on what's to come. This war in Gaza is extremely dangerous. And it has the potential to spread, absolutely. And it is spread means devastation for the whole region. No exceptions whatsoever. Nobody should think that they are exempt. Europe would suffer. Refugees would flux in, definitely. oil price and gas price and everything will go up. The terrorism and extremism will go up, because these are breeding grounds then for this, and this is what we want to avoid. And that's why there should be an immediate ceasefire. There should be immediate help for Palestine to go in. There should be, these corridors need to open. These carpet bombing of these Palestinians that's taking place right now should stop. And then we could talk about what to come. Otherwise, we are running the risk of really the whole region to go up in flames. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you. I have a lot of thank yous, so please bear with me while I make it through my long list of thank yous, and maybe reserve applause for the end. First of all, let me thank you, Farhad, Victoria, Ivan, and Adnan. I can't thank you enough for coming, sharing your time and your insight. We're really grateful. It's been a really rich discussion. So first, thanks to you. Thank you to the audience and to everyone online for joining in. Your feedback and your comments and questions have been really important. The Iraq Initiative has been a really important part of our work here in the Middle East North Africa program and at Chatham House. We're very proud of this work, and this wouldn't be possible without Crescent Petroleum and the Al Suwaidi family, so a big thank you to them. Additionally, I need to give special thanks to the amazing team that runs our Iraq program from the bottom up and the top down. None of this would be possible without the hard work and the dedication, first of all, of Renad Mansour, who has brought us here today. Also, I have to thank Haider El-Shakari, who has been so wonderful. The person who has worked overtime day in and day out making this possible has been Reni Zhelaskova. We have a big team, so now I'm just going to make a long list of names, not in any order, but they've all been here working in, supporting. They help everything that we do. We are a team in the Middle East North Africa program. So let me also thank Nicole Khwaja, Isabel Rosenbaum, Isra Gilani, Bassem Mahmoud, Farial Muslimi, Carla Bach. I hope I haven't left anyone out, but thank you to them, and thank you all for being here. This has been a wonderful day. We would like to invite you upstairs for a closing reception and to spend a bit more time continuing the conversation. So thank you very much.